Just waiting on Alice, but okay. Excellent. So good evening, everyone. My name is Eric Berkey. I'm the chair of the Citizens Advisory Commission on Housing. Welcome back. It's been a while. This is our July 9th, 2020 Housing Commission virtual meeting. So I've got a bunch of things I need to say in order to guide our meeting today. So process questions should be answered here in the next few minutes, and then we will get going on our agenda. So for the safety of our staff and residents, we are holding a virtual meeting today, which is the first, I believe, for the Housing Commission. Welcome to our commissioners, county staff, applicants, and community members who are joining us remotely. We're legally authorized to hold this virtual meeting based on the governor's executive orders, legislation adopted by the Virginia General Assembly, and the county board's continuity of operations ordinance that was adopted in March 2020. So before we begin, I'd like to cover a few specifics to orient everyone to our new virtual environment. So today's meeting is available to stream from the county website. A couple of very important items. First, I've already asked everyone to mute yourself when you're not speaking. This is very important so that we can have a clean meeting and we can hear one another. And that, of course, the recording that goes on the county's website is, it's a good recording. People can hear what we are saying. Please turn off your video until you're ready to speak. I'm going to get to that in a second, but what we're going to try when folks are looking to speak, I'm saying commissioners, most of us should have a raise your hand function, which we can try in a second, but some of you may not. And so we're going to figure out a way to either have folks raise their hands or turn their video on so that I can know, somebody wants to speak, because obviously I can't scan the room like I would if we were on the third floor of the Bozeman Center. Audio of today's meeting is available by phone. If commissioners, presenters, or speakers lose connectivity during today's meeting, please connect with us by phone. That's very important. Reconnect by phone. You'll still be able to participate. We'll figure it out if that happens. For those of us joining through Microsoft Teams, like I said, please keep your phones and other devices muted until you're called on. Just try to keep everything kind of quiet around you to minimize interference. When you're called upon to speak, please unmute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon that is located on your meeting command bar. That's the bar that's on the bottom, kind of in the middle. The moderator tonight is Joel. He doesn't have the ability to unmute you, so you need to unmute yourself when you're going to speak. If you're dialing in by phone, please press *6 to unmute. Okay. For the commissioners, we're gonna go back to a rule that I've used in our previous meetings. It's been a while, obviously. But when we've had hefty agendas like we had early on in the year, I had a rule where I asked that folks kind of speak once, and then we let everybody have the opportunity to speak or ask questions, and then we'll go back. Hi, Paul. Just make sure to mute yourself and turn your video off. So we're gonna do that again here. I promise I will make sure everybody has the opportunity to speak. Everybody has the opportunity to ask follow-up questions if they need to. We've got some hefty agenda items tonight. So we will do that. Just give me some patience and grace, and we'll get through it together. So I talked about, if you want to speak as a commissioner, please try to use the raise your hand function. Housing commissioners, we're going to do a quick demo. Can you, if you have the function, can you try to hit the raise your hand function now? Okay. So I am seeing my hand, Ben Arthur, Haley Norris, Karen Surface, Danielle Quest, Evelyn raised. I know there are others in the meeting, so they may not be able to raise hands. So if your hand is not raised now, I'll just ask that you turn your video on and we'll figure it out. I will get to you for your question or for your comment, okay? So everybody can put their hands down now. Okay, great. Public speakers, we have a couple of public speakers tonight. You will be called upon at the assigned time. Pre-registration to speak at tonight's meeting was required. and we're not able to accommodate additional speakers. Public comment will take place within the same timeframes as we would provide in an in-person meeting. Speakers will have 3 minutes to comment as individuals, 3 minutes to speak if representing an organization. Speaking timer for all speakers will be displayed on the screen by staff. If you're dialing in by phone and unable to see the screen, we will provide an audible warning when 30 seconds are remaining. You will be muted when your time has concluded. The meeting chat, this is really important too. There is a meeting chat. It is active for presenters or commissioners who need technical assistance only. That's the only purpose that we're going to use the chat tonight. Okay, and Danielle, you can go ahead and take your hand down. So the meeting chat should not be used for discussion, ideas, public comment, questions about agenda items, requests for more information. I can't emphasize this point enough. It's important for our Freedom of Information Act requirements and our open meetings requirements that everything be on the record and the recording. And so if we have all this stuff in the chat, then I need to read it and it just gets too complicated. So unless you're having like a technical issue that you need us to help with, just raise your hand. I'll call on you. We will figure it out. Okay. All voting tonight will be taken via roll call, which is something new for us too. So I will go down our roster and then ask for yes or no, and then we'll do that. The agenda for I'm almost done. The agenda for this meeting is limited in nature. Pursuant to the county's virtual meetings guidance. I think it's fair to say this will be something that we may have a little bit more flexibility as we enter the fall. But know that as the chair, I worked with Joel Franklin, who's our staff liaison, to put together the agenda. I understand there are certainly issues and topics that folks may wish to see on the agenda tonight or in the near future. I totally get it. I'm with you. I just ask that you give us some time and patience as we navigate this new process. If there are issues that do need to be raised at a Housing Commission meeting, please reach out to me, reach out to Joel. We'll figure it out. This is certainly a place where we should be talking about issues publicly, so we'll work on that. I do want to thank county staff and the county board for making this meeting possible. It's been a difficult process. This commission has not met since February. We were about to meet in March when the coronavirus pandemic just kind of hit that week. And I know it's been challenging. We've been working through stuff. So I just want to say, I'm really appreciative that we were able to find a way to restart these commission meetings. Just a couple special thanks, Jessica Marguerite, who I believe is still on the call, who's been helping with the technical aspects. Our staff liaison, Joel Franklin. Joel's awesome. Been talking to Joel a bunch during this time. And then he's not on the call, but Matt DeFerente, who's our county board liaison, former member of this commission. Matt's been a great resource for us, even though it's really been me speaking to him. Matt's been incredibly supportive and behind the scenes is a big part of why we're able to meet tonight. We were able to figure this all out. So a big thanks to them. Last thing, and then we'll get going with our meeting. This is a public forum. It's a public meeting, even though it's occurring virtually. I believe I said that the meeting is recorded, is being posted to the county website. All information associated with today's meeting, whether it's written or spoken, is subject to Freedom of Information Act requirements. And I believe that is all I have. So on to the first item on the agenda, which is public comment on items not on the agenda. And I will confirm with Joel, I believe there are no speakers who registered for public comment, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, well, that's easy. So the second item on the agenda is the approval of notes. The housing commissioners were sent a copy of our notes from our last meeting, which was our February meeting. So do I have a motion to approve the notes? So I guess I should say, does anybody have any amendments, additions, issues with the notes in their current form as we entertain a motion to approve the notes? Not hearing any, do I have a motion to approve the notes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. So this is the fun part where we get to go down and call the roll. Okay. So I'm going to call your name. And if you could give me, an aye or no, whether you, however you vote on the motion. Okay. Commissioner Arthur?
Aye.
Commissioner Berkey is an aye. Commissioner Blank? Don't believe it's here. There's somebody who has not muted themselves. Danielle and Alice, if you can please mute yourselves. Thank you. Commissioner Bray?
Aye.
Commissioner Brown?
Aye.
Commissioner Edwards?
Aye.
Commissioner G?
Aye.
Commissioner Hogan?
Aye.
I don't believe I see Commissioner Montgomery on the call. Commissioner Norris?
Aye.
Commissioner Quist?
Aye.
Commissioner Seraph?
Aye.
And I don't believe I see Commissioner Sims. So that is all. So that is 10 ayes, 0 nays, no abstentions. Okay. The next item on the agenda then is an action item. We have two Columbia Pike neighborhoods form-based code items tonight. One is an action item, so we will hear about it tonight and then vote on whether we recommend or not with possible modifications. The second is an information item only. I'm sure that Melissa or whoever else from county staff will probably help explain kind of how we got here. I don't want to put the cart before the horse. So in any event, I will turn it over to, is it Matt? Matt, whoever is going to be presenting now. Matt, to give us the presentation on the Neighborhoods Form-Based Code Cash Contribution Housing Amendment.
Great. Thank you, everyone, and good evening. Can you all hear me well and see my screen?
Yes.
All right. I'll get going, and during the Q&A, I'll bring up my video so it'll be easier to follow the presentation that way. But again, my name is Matt Matuzek. I'm representing the Planning Division within the Department of Community Planning, Housing and Development. I'm going to provide a general context for tonight's discussion before handing it over to our housing staff to describe the proposed amendment in greater detail. And I think throughout this evening, we have one large presentation, but it's broken up in two different parts. As you mentioned, the first one is an action item. The other one, I think, is really more background information, realizing that we'll be coming back to this commission later this year in October. So before we get started, I think it's important to first clarify our updated approach to the larger package of amendments that staff has been working on relating to the Columbia Pike Neighborhoods Form-Based Code. To date, staff has engaged various stakeholders to solicit feedback regarding changes to two different elements of the Form-Based Code. The first one is the potential to introduce a cash contribution for limited instances where commercial uses could be proposed with redevelopment. And number two, an adjustment to the maximum income restrictions associated with affordable ownership units, as well as an extension of their overall term of affordability. The request to advertise for these amendments took place in June, at which point the County Board only authorized this month's public hearings to cover the cash contribution aspect of this. The affordable ownership requirements will now be discussed at the October public hearings and therefore are not the subject of this presentation's or staff's recommendation in front of you. We will, however, cover it. So we also wanted to provide a quick recap of some of the planning efforts along Columbia Pike, which led to the creation of the Neighborhoods Form-Based Code. But it's a good, I think, primer before we get right into the recommendations that come. So as many of you are familiar, starting in 2008, the county initiated the second phase of the Columbia Pike Initiative. The purpose of this effort was to study the multifamily residential areas located in between the commercial nodes that were previously studied as part of the first phase during the late 1990s and early 2000s. Unlike the commercial nodes, whose main development, phase two focused more on preserving and creating housing that would be affordable to a broad range of incomes. This was particularly important as the county was already experiencing a significant loss of affordability resulting from market pressures on existing residential properties. The 4-year planning effort culminated in the adoption of the Columbia Pike Neighborhoods Area Plan, which was adopted in 2012. While addressing numerous aspects of the vision for the corridor and wide-ranging policy recommendations, its primary implementation strategy included the development of a second form-based code that would apply to those multifamily residential areas along Columbia Pike. At that point, the first form-based code has already proven successful over its decade worth of implementation within those commercial nodes I mentioned earlier. And you can see both geographies of each code on this map on slide 5. The neighborhood's form-based code, which ended up being adopted a year later in 2013, includes many requirements, though its most unique is the on-site affordability requirement, which is applied to every redevelopment proposal. This requirement is always proportional to the level of change being proposed for each site, and is the responsibility of the developer to contribute, rather than county subsidies being utilized for these units. This is particularly important as most of the development utilizing the neighborhood's form-based code is anticipated to be residential in nature. With that, I will hand it over to housing staff to provide greater detail on the cash contribution aspect of our proposal.
Thanks very much, Matt. My name is Melissa Danowski, and I'm with the Housing Division. And as Matt said, I will go over the amendment for the cash contribution for commercial uses in the neighborhood form-based code projects. Next slide. The neighborhood's form-based code includes 5 areas which are designated as mixed use or urban storefront in the building envelope standards. These sites are located along existing commercial intersections and have the option of proposing commercial uses. The neighborhood form-based code does not currently address commercial development scenarios, and a recent neighborhood form-based code proposal for a commercial development in the Foxcroft Heights areas helped bring this issue to light. Because the preservation and creation of affordable housing is a primary goal of the Neighborhoods Area Plan and Neighborhoods Form-Based Code, staff is proposing a cash contribution into the Affordable Housing Investment Fund, or AHIF, if commercial uses are proposed in these areas. Next. This is a map that shows the Neighborhood Form-Based Code Revitalization District areas, which are in blue. The sites that are designated urban storefront or urban mixed use are in the red circles. And these areas are all either adjacent the commercial form-based code nodes or adjacent commercial uses. Next slide. In terms of the calculation for the cash contribution, staff proposes using the same calculation as used for site plan projects, known as the base ordinance calculation. This calculation is a formula based on gross floor area and floor area ratio. For mixed-use projects, the existing on-site affordable requirement would apply to the residential portions of the development. The cash contribution would only apply to the commercial portion of the development, and no cash contribution will be allowed for residential uses. Next slide. This slide shows a hypothetical example of different development scenarios on a 53,300 square foot site. The first scenario is a 100% residential project that contains 165 total units. The affordable unit requirement per the existing code would be 46 on-site affordable units. In the mixed-use scenario, the project contains 140 total residential units and 30,000 square feet of retail. The affordable contribution would be 39 on-site affordable units due to the residential portion of the development and a 61,500 Affordable Housing Investment Fund contribution for the retail portion. The last scenario is a 100% commercial project. In this scenario, the proposal would be required to make about a 700,000 contribution into AHIF per the proposed calculation. Next slide. This item has come before a variety of community groups, including the Form-Based Code Advisory Working Group, NAOP, which is a commercial real estate group, the Columbia Pike President's Group, the Zoning Committee of the Planning Commission, and this was discussed with the County Board as part of the request to advertise in June and was considered by the Planning Commission on July 6. The Planning Commission voted unanimously in support of the recommendation, and this item will be considered by the County Board at the July 18th meeting. Next slide. From these public meetings, staff did hear general support for a cash contribution if commercial uses are proposed, and that the commercial development should not be exempt from contributing to affordable housing. However, some did suggest that the cash contribution calculation may be less expensive for a developer to fulfill when compared to the residential on-site unit contribution, thereby incentivizing only commercial development in these areas. This was contrasted with other comments which suggested the proposed cash contribution may prevent potential commercial uses from locating to these 5 areas and a desire to see more commercial development along Columbia Pike. Staff continues to recommend the cash contribution as proposed, as it would help treat commercial developments similarly to other places in the county, and staff believes would not over-incentivize or under-incentivize commercial development. Next slide. In summary, staff's recommendation is to adopt the attached ordinance to amend, reenact, and recodify the Arlington County Zoning Ordinance, Article 11.2, Section 902, the Columbia Pike Neighborhoods Form-Based Code Districts, Appendix B, to allow for a cash contribution into AHIF in the limited instances when the proposed neighborhood form-based code development includes commercial uses. And that's the conclusion of this part of the presentation, focusing on the cash contribution, and I'll hand it over to the chair.
Thanks, Melissa. Okay, so this is an action item. So I'm going back to my notes here. Joel, I believe that there was no public comment for the cash contribution action item. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So that being the case, then this item is with the commission. So now is the opportunity for commissioners to ask questions or weigh in. As I said at the beginning, if you'd like to do so, please try to use the raise your hand function. And if you don't believe that's working, you can turn your camera on and I will call on you and we'll go through like we normally do. Okay, so first, I see you folks. I see Paul and Holly. So the first speaker will be Danielle, and then Holly, and then Paul. So go ahead and you can unmute yourself, Danielle.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to go first. I just waited a little bit and pressed the little hand button. So I hear that there's no public comments about this proposal, and I think that's because I don't think the public knows too much about it. And I've seen some confusion in the public about whether this is the commercial form-based code, the neighborhoods form-based code, and generally that people don't know the difference between the two. But looking at the presentation, it looks like the Foxcroft Hotel is really what started this conversation. And you found kind of an opening where there's some silence in the neighborhood's form-based code. And I certainly understand the desire, particularly with the push to build around Amazon to be able to raise more funds for the AHIF. But looking at the map, it looks like the 4 out of the 5 areas that this would apply are on the western end of the pike, where there's very few commercial opportunities already. And the county's own, if I recall, the market study that the county did acknowledge that there really aren't a lot of commercial development and opportunities on the western part of the pike. And I think both the renters and the homeowners along the western part of the pike are looking for more commercial development, not incentives, not more costly development. I see this as if you're a mixed-use building and you have to contribute to the AHIF fund for the commercial part for the storefronts, that's just going to make the commercial development more expensive. It's going to make the leases more expensive, and the small businesses that are trying to get those storefronts are going to have to pay more money, and their goods and services are going to be more expensive. And that's kind of not what we need on the western end of the pike, where we already have enough of our local residents that are lacking in disposable income. We need to have more storefronts that they can afford to go to, and just more amenities in general. And I know this is just small pieces of land, but I'm not keen to add more costs to what little commercial development we have on the western end of the pike. I have a lot of other thoughts too, but I'm going to let others continue.
And I just to clarify, for when we do this, it's just occurred to me, And Melissa, if you want to chime in, feel free. But it may be helpful for the commissioners to clarify if you have a question, just to clarify that you also may have a question, so that Melissa or Matt or whomever from staff can chime in to answer it, so we can just kind of manage the flow better. But Melissa, if you want to respond, feel free. Go ahead.
Sure, thanks. So I heard a few different things in that comment, but I think the main thing was that the cash contribution might disincentivize commercial uses from locating into these 5 areas. And I just want to note that the impetus for this cash contribution really is to help fulfill the neighborhood's area plan and the neighborhood form-based code residential areas to preserve and create affordability. The commercial code, which is where the majority of commercial uses would go, actually does not have an affordability requirement. And these 5 areas are kind of just filling out the previous commercial corridor vision. But because they are in the neighborhoods area, we felt it was important that they also contribute to affordable housing, same as residential developments. And I will say we did meet with NAIOP, a commercial real estate group, and did not hear from developers that this contribution was too onerous or that it would prevent commercial development from locating to Columbia Pike. It is purposefully the same calculation as is done for site plan projects. So I think there's somewhat of a tried and true method to using that calculation. So those are kind of the reasons, part of the reasons that we are suggesting and recommending the cash contribution for these 5 commercial areas.
Did you talk to CIPRO at all in doing your outreach?
We did talk to the executive director, and she, through the Form-Based Code Advisory Working Group, and then we also met with the Pikes President's Group, but we did not meet specifically with the CPRO Board of Directors.
Matt, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, thank you. No, Melissa is exactly right, and I think for this reason we try to highlight in our presentation that the typical nature by which commercial activity is introduced on Columbia Pike through the neighborhood's form-based code or the commercial form-based code is usually in the ground floor of some of these mixed-use buildings. The market in the last decade, if not 2, and likely well into the future, is going to continue to emphasize the residential use in these mixed-use projects. So I think this is really targeting and preparing ourselves for is to make sure that a nominal fee, I think the example we used on slide 11 under scenario 2, that would have had a mixture of residential units with retail on the ground floor, was only $61,500. In the greater scheme of a larger development project, that is a very nominal figure that we don't suspect would disincentivize the use of commercial in these projects. But I think Melissa actually had a greater point in that the entire fundamental nature of the density that's allocated through the neighborhood's form-based code was based on the exchange of on-site affordability or some contribution to that subject in exchange for that density. And I think allowing commercial developments to potentially utilize what some could consider a loophole is that we're not getting anything back in exchange for that density. And I think that is a fundamental issue that we're trying to correct, given that perhaps we may see some commercial activity in the future. But again, historically, the trends were that the commercial form-based code is the vehicle through which we receive most of the commercial uses on the corridor.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to move on to Commissioner Bray, and then Commissioner Brown, and then Commissioner Arthur. I see your hand is up, and I will get to you after Commissioner Brown. Commissioner Bray.
Yes, thank you. I don't really have a huge issue with any of this. I did want to go over the math though again, and I think the math was on, I don't know, I think somebody mentioned it was slide 11, and I was concerned that, you know, the $61,000 doesn't get us much for affordable units, and so we might be losing out on some possible, because, you know, $61,000 isn't going to get us a bathroom in a deal. So that's my only concern.
I think if I may, it's a very interesting point. In that scenario 2, the huge advantage and I guess reality in that potential development is that significant on-site affordability, 39 units in this hypothetical, would be delivered with this project. So I think equating and calculating the value of those units in addition to the 61,000, I think is really where the entire package comes in as we consider what the true value of the entire scenario would be.
Yeah, but in scenario one, which you would have 46 on-site units, right? So you're actually losing 7 units.
Correct.
So the $61,000 doesn't really appropriately address the 7 units we're losing, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, and this is Melissa again. I see your point. I see your point, but the this was trying to balance the desire for more commercial along Columbia Pike with a contribution into affordable housing. And for mixed use projects, they do still have that on-site affordable unit requirement. And if they were to go mixed use, that is somewhat of a different business model. And so we didn't want the cash contribution to be too onerous that it would prevent necessarily commercial use from locating there.
Okay, we'll move on to Commissioner Brown.
Thanks.
And folks, feel free to if you want to, you can turn your camera on when you speak, but you're not obligated to.
Okay, I will, so you get to see me. So this is a question, perhaps multi-part, and it betrays ignorance, I'll go ahead and say. But in the commercial, in the form-based code and the neighborhoods plan, is there any provision for providing affordable retail, that is retail that could be afforded by small and local businesses with redevelopment? It strikes me that this kind of contribution seems like something that would go toward that, but the money we're talking about here is not likely to make much difference. So I just wondered if there is any provision in either of those plans to encourage or incentivize the development of at least some affordable retail, and if not, was thought given to that either in the planning process or in this process.
So Matt can feel free to chime in, but in regards to the neighborhoods area plan, it's my understanding that did focus primarily on residential uses. However, I know there was recently a Columbia Pike retail study that was completed separate from this, which may have had recommendations on how to support affordable retail. Matt, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, it is an interesting question that came up, I think, in some of the earlier engagements we had. And I think I may have heard similar comments from the CPRO representatives that were in the meeting, in that if we're so focused on the affordable residential uses, what are we doing about the affordable retail uses? How do we encourage and limit, encourage additional businesses for relocating to the Pike, but also limit the turnover that's happening sometimes? I think what's interesting to note is that neighborhoods form-based code applies to residential areas with very few exceptions. And again, its main purpose is to make sure that Columbia Pike continues to provide a mixture of housing that serves various income levels. Its purpose was never to address commercial activity, spur retail, or protect retail. And many of the retail businesses that I think we're typically focused on, especially the legacy businesses, are located in the commercial form-based code districts. So one of the interesting things that the commercial market study identified at the end of last year is that some additional thought should be given as a strategy, but also in the broader context of how are we addressing this problem throughout the county, not just Columbia Pike. And I think a set of tools, if they were to be identified, we're going to have to follow its separate process rather than just relying on the form-based code to provide all of the assistance and tools that could serve those businesses.
Thank you. We'll move on to Commissioner Arthur.
Yes, I'd like to align myself with the third bullet point in Ms. Danowski's public input, which again, Commissioner Quist has already brought up about the desire for more office space on the Pike. Mr. Matuzik has already highlighted the fact that vast majority of the commercial development here has been ground floor retail, and very little, if I think maybe the only one portion of the building has been office space, the BM Smith headquarters in Penrose. No hotels that I know of. Please correct me if I'm wrong on this. I think Juliet Hinsey at the Planning Commission, I was hoping she'd be here again tonight to speak, was pretty eloquent about it. She spoke about the Columbia Heights Civic Association being very concerned that we're getting a very much of an imbalance of residential to office space along the Pike. And I think that's fairly important to keep the right balance there. Just for a variety of reasons, I think it's good to have a mix of residents and office so that you have street traffic throughout the day and stuff like that. So I'm just kind of, I think any additional requirement for a commercial development, no matter how small the monetary contribution to AF is taking us in the wrong direction there. So I'm not really sure that this is the right thing to do, but kind of more broadly, maybe this is not a housing commission thing, but it really would be nice if the county as a whole would think about how we can spur development. Even the commercial nodes, it's like it's all been retail and no office or hotel. So it'd be nice to see that change. I think would make for a much healthier neighborhood. Thanks very much.
Nope, I think
Sorry.
you're on
Thank you,
mute.
Commissioner Arthur. Go ahead.
So this is Melissa. I didn't hear a direct question, so I'll just refer to the previous comments.
Do we, are there other commissioners who'd like this? Okay.
This is Doris Ray when you have it. I'm on the phone.
Oh, good, Doris. I'm glad you're on the phone. Go ahead, Doris.
Okay. I want to second or third the notion of recommending something to the county board about affordable commercial or retail space. If they're going to use, if a development is going to use space on the first floor that could have been residential, there might be a community benefit, and particularly for nonprofit service organizations like those serving the disability community, or like Legal Services of Northern Virginia, which people have to travel to. And that's a neighborhood that is has a lot of people who are low and moderate incomes and might be using services like that. And I know that the organization that I work for actually was driven out of a commercial space. That was our first office was over on the Pike, or just right off the Pike, and we were driven out of there because of rent and all of that. So that's one thing, and I don't know whether there's a way to work this into the requirements existing in the form-based code or wherever it needs to be. And then the other thing is the amount of money in return for the commercial development. There are two things about that I wanted to ask. One, if somebody is developing a property in the area that would be covered by this, and I'm hearing particularly the western part of the Pike, if somebody is redeveloping a site and only putting in commercial, will this apply, or does it only apply if they're using the site to build housing, and it's and the first floor is being used for retail, and then my concern is, again, the same has been addressed about the amount of return for affordable housing of the fee, because we will be losing, from the Disability Commission standpoint, we may be losing not only affordable units, but units that might be fully accessible. So those are my concerns.
Okay, so I can respond to that. So one of your questions was, if a developer is developing a property and only puts in commercial, will the cash contribution apply? And yes, and just the cash contribution would apply if it was 100% commercial development. I will note, though, that in the commercial form-based code, which has the majority of commercial sites, all of the development there has been mixed use. So it has included the on-site residential component, and that would, or excuse me, if a development was mixed use in developing the neighborhood form-based code, it would still include that affordable on-site component.
So does that mean there's more money that would accrue, or?
It means that they would provide on-site units for the residential portion, and then we would obtain a cash contribution for the retail portion of the development.
But that's what I'm asking. So the cash contribution, would that still be quite low? Or
it would be based on the calculation we're currently using for our site plan based ordinance contributions, and so it would be that contribution.
Okay.
I see that Haley's hand is raised. Go ahead, Haley.
Hi, thank you. So I have a quick clarification question and then a comment. Sorry, my light's a little weird in this room. So Melissa and Matt, am I understanding correctly, is this amendment giving these few sites that are in the neighborhood form-based code the ability to develop commercial, or do they already have that right?
That is a great question. They already have that right. We are not creating any commercial sites in the neighborhood form-based code.
Okay, so if I'm understanding that, like I think this is a great amendment, because I think it's taking something that these sites were already able to do, and it's capturing some funding for affordable housing through this amendment. So I just wanted, and it seems like it's bringing it in line with the commercial form-based code, which, you know, these sites kind of almost could be in either one. They're a little bit unique, it looks like, based on the map. So I just wanted to say, I think this is a good amendment, and yeah, I support it.
I'm going to chime in myself, and then I see, Ben, you get your hand raised. I agree with Haley. I think that staff is trying to rectify kind of a gap. I think this is kind of a gap that's in the current part of the form-based code here, where we potentially could be losing out on opportunities and we would be gaining them. And I also agree with the concern about balancing the need for affordable housing with affordable development. Being several of us are Pike residents, I myself am one, and you know, several of the areas that we saw, you know, commercial development is highly desired, and so there's a balancing of that. So where I'm inclined to be right now is to see how it goes over the next 5 or 10 years or however long this has to go. But I think this is a reasonable approach. I think stepping back, you know, this was part of one big package of amendments to the neighborhoods form-based code. I think it's fair to say this is the less controversial one, the one that we will be hearing about as an informational item. I think it's very fair to say is going to be much more debated, and so for me, this seems like an easy win to pick up some more resources for affordable housing. So that being said, it looks like Commissioner Arthur took his hand down. I want to make sure, you know, folks have the opportunity to chime in unless we have a motion on the floor regarding this action item.
Eric, this is Alice. I don't have a hand to raise.
Go ahead, Alice. And you can turn your video on if you want.
Hi, everybody. Slightly off topic, but I wasn't sure when to include it. I think we have 2 Housing Commission babies to welcome to the big family. Sarah Pizzo and Eric Berkey are both parents for the, first and third time. So congratulations to you both. I don't know if anybody else had one and I didn't know about it. So sorry, just slipping that in. And to be back on topic.
We're glad to share it with the rest of the county.
There you go. I wanted to follow up on what Holly was saying. And I'm feeling torn because on the other hand, I do understand that this could be some sort of a small disincentive for commercial that we want. But I feel like in those scenarios, it seems like a pretty big drop in affordable units to get a little tiny contribution to AHIF. So I wasn't clear about how that was valued one way or the other. And I guess I'm wondering, I think the county has needed to figure out some supports like we've talked about for years about affordable small business ownership as a separate issue in the whole county and of course on the Pike, very separate from housing, figuring out some incentives and some grant programs, I don't know what, but kind of like that the economic development people need to be looking at. So I wonder if that could be where we could look to help businesses that are trying to occupy these spaces, like Danielle and Doris were saying, because I think that is a real problem. But on the housing side for our commission, I was more wondering about how that calculation came about, because it looks to me like if that is going to be an effect, if we're looking for housing, we're actually going to lose out on a lot of housing with this. And my follow-up question to that is, this calculation, which I think is mirrored from the regular zoning ordinance, has been needed to be looked at for a while in terms of, is it on par with our market? So I'm wondering if this does go through, will it be part of a reevaluation of the calculation, GFA calculation going forward anyway? Thank you.
Thanks, Alice. So again, I just want to respond that the reason that we're proposing the same calculation as used for the site plans is because we wanted to treat commercial developments similarly to how they're treated throughout the county. And I do want to note that if the site plan cash contribution calculation is changed in the future, we would certainly take a look at that and perhaps analyze it and see if an amendment would be warranted for the neighborhood form-based code. And I just want to also, I think as you've heard, there's varying opinions on whether the cash contribution is too much and could disincentivize commercial, or if it's too little and not providing enough for affordable housing. And I just want to kind of reiterate some of the comments I made before, which is that the vast majority of development on Columbia Pike in the commercial code has been mixed use, so you have gotten the on-site affordability. And in addition, we have not heard, on the other side, we have not heard from developers that this cash contribution is too onerous and would necessarily prevent a commercial development from locating to these areas.
Commissioner Quist, you have your hand raised.
Thank you. I have a question for these nodes next to the commercial centers. What if a developer wanted to put committed affordable housing path there with street level retail like the Shell or like Gillian Place? Would they have to have an affordable housing contribution within a committed affordable housing building for the retail space?
That's a good question. So if they were to do committed affordable housing, whatever committed affordable housing they did would count towards their requirement. And it's always their choice in these 5 areas, they have the choice to do residential, or they could do commercial, or they could do mixed use. So in this scenario, you know, well, actually, in this scenario, the committed affordable housing would fulfill the residential portion, but then there would be a commercial portion. But again, that's their choice to do it or not.
So they'd be probably receiving AHIF funds for the residential portion, but giving to the AHIF funds for the commercial portion.
In so many words, and perhaps that could be, you know, looked at as part of the Affordable Housing Investment Fund loan, if there is one.
Okay. And just one final comment that I actually have heard from a developer, a little bit of concern that, you know, I wasn't around Arlington when the form-based code, the final compromises were made about balancing development and affordable housing. A little concern from a developer, actually more than one developer, that if we're going to start putting the base, what is it, the base code that's required for the rest of the county, start adding that into the form-based code. What here for the neighborhood form-based code, and my understanding is that staff has been looking at adding it for the commercial nodes as well. That's really going to change the balance and could create, there could be a loss of support for the form-based code in the county, along Columbia Pike. So I just really caution that we be careful about how much we bring into the form-based code now, because we don't want to tip that balance in the wrong direction and lose support for what's been a very, I think, a very successful plan for businesses and for preserving affordable housing along the Pike.
Thank you. Do we have any other commissioners with questions or comments, or a potential motion on the floor?
Could I ask one question?
Yeah, who is speaking?
It's Doris. I just had one follow-up question after
Go ahead, Doris.
Holly's. I mean, not Holly, Alice's. I'm just curious how this works about if there's a development that comes in there as a commercial development, and I think the answer to my question was that if it's just a commercial development they're going to use the property for and not housing, that the fee would apply. But I'm just curious, you know, the way the affordable housing ordinance is applied, I believe, is based in you know, the floor space, the FAR, right? And so that potential density going up could be apartments too, if somebody else was using it for affordable apartments. Is the structure of, you know, the fee taking into account lost extra units that could have been in a building? Does that make any sense to the question I'm asking?
I'm not sure if this will answer your question, but the affordable on-site calculation is really dependent upon how many existing units are at the site and how many new units are adding. And so the calculation would be purely based on what their proposed development scenario is, not a potential development scenario, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm just saying that density is taken into account too, and the usage of a particular property could hold, you know, a developer could put one floor of affordable, or one floor housing development, or it could be 2, 3, 4, and I think there are height limitations. But you know, I've seen some of the apartments over there are pretty big. So that's why I was concerned whether it was going to take into account, you know, the loss of units that could have been there because the affordable housing developer might put in more density. That's what I was thinking. And so that would create a situation where we're losing still more money for the AF, I think.
So I think if I understand the second half of that question, I know you covered a lot of ground, but I think I've heard this from someone else where they see FAR in language that might now become part of the form-based code. Are we entering this new territory that the form-based code was never intended to, operate in? That's not really the case, because it is still a form driven tool, very similar to what we have in Crystal City, where we essentially set up the building envelope, and it's really up to the design team for every individual site to maximize how much they can really fit within that envelope. And in this case, we really just set a height restriction in terms of stories. And the calculation that Melissa was just alluding to really looks at how much is there today, how much they're replacing it with, and the delta of that. Right. It's a sliding scale. It's always going to be between 20 and 30% for new construction, and you basically dictate where you end up based on that proposal and the existing site conditions.
Thanks, Matt. So I'm looking at the clock. It's about 5 to 8. This is a 2-hour meeting. We're not going to go to 11 o'clock like we normally would. We have a cap. So seeing no other folks chiming in, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion that the Housing Commission recommend that the County Board amend, reenact, and recodify the Arlington County Zoning Ordinance, Article 11.2, Section 902, which is the Columbia Pike Neighborhoods Form-Based Codes Districts, to allow for a cash contribution into the Affordable Housing Investment Fund in limited instances where the neighborhood's form-based code development includes commercial uses. Do I have a second for my motion?
I'll second. This is Haley.
So since it's my motion, I will speak to it just very briefly. Like I said, I seriously consider the other concerns that were raised by some of our commissioners. But in my mind, this particular amendment to the form-based code fills a gap that currently exists. Is it the perfect balance, for the contribution? I don't really know, but I'm inclined to give our staff the benefit of the doubt that they looked at this very seriously. And I think really the only thing we can do now is just kind of see how it plays out, and they'll monitor to see the effectiveness of this over the next, 3, 5, or longer years to see whether it's had any impact, positive or negative. I think that they've tried to balance the commercial as well as housing, needs of the Pike here. And to me, it's an easy win because if there is some development here through the form-based code, now we can make sure that we, get resources for affordable housing or even get on-site affordable housing if that's going to be the case. So that motion having a second, we will go through the roll call on that motion. So let me pull up that list. And Charles, welcome. Commissioner Sims, welcome to the meeting. So we will go through one by one. You can either say aye or you can say nay to the particular motion or abstain. So I'll begin with Commissioner Arthur.
Nay.
Commissioner Berkey, I'm an aye. Commissioner Bray.
Aye.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner Edwards.
Aye.
Commissioner G.
Aye.
Commissioner Hogan.
Aye.
Commissioner Norris.
Aye.
Commissioner Quist.
Nay.
Commissioner Seraph.
It's Surface.
Seraph,
Aye.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. Aye.
Okay. Commissioner Sims.
Abstain.
Abstain. Okay. So I have
Eric.
I
believe
go ahead, Joel.
Commissioner Montgomery is also on.
Oh, she is. Okay. Commissioner Montgomery.
At least she was.
I'm not seeing her.
She was a call-in.
Commissioner Montgomery, in order to unmute yourself, you'll need to hit *6 on your phone if you called in.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Okay. Welcome.
Thank you. And that would be an aye.
Okay, that is an aye. So Joel, I had 9 ayes, 2 nays, and 1 abstention.
Yes, correct.
Okay. So this is typically we allow those folks who voted no, if the resolution passed, in order to kind of express your reasons why, so that when we craft our letter to the county board, we can kind of fully explain our thinking. So Commissioner Quist, why don't you go ahead if you'd like to.
Sure. I dissented because for mixed use development, I don't think that there's a significant AHIP contribution as far as the larger amount of money that's necessary to build units, as one of the commissioners said. But I do believe that the impact it will have on storefronts and the ability of small businesses to afford renting storefronts along the pike will be greatly impacted. I'm also generally opposed to bringing in the site plan requirements for other parts of the county into the form-based code. The Columbia Pike is different. We have a different set of incentives and a different balance. And I think that this would be going in the wrong direction of not only having the affordability requirements of the form-based code as it is now, but then also overlaying the site plan requirements that are in the rest of the county. I think that's just would be very destructive to the ability to have commercial development on the pike, which we're all looking for.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Commissioner Arthur.
I mean, I suppose I could speak again, but it would just be repeating my comments earlier.
Okay.
It's just that I don't believe there's enough office space on the pike to achieve a decent balance with the residential. And contrary to staff's opinion, I think this will provide a disincentive.
Thank you, Commissioner Arthur. Okay, so that motion passes. So I will be working with Joel, like I normally do, to craft a letter that will be sent to the county board before their next meeting. Will be distributed to the commission once it's ready, and I will incorporate Commissioner Quist and Commissioner Arthur's comments. So the next item on the agenda then is kind of the second part of our neighborhoods form-based code, which is an information item. So we're just hearing about it for the first time, and that's the median income limits for ownership units. And so I'll throw it back to county staff.
Thank you. Good evening, commissioners. I'm Akiria Brown. I work in the housing division, and I will be talking this evening about the AMI increase proposal of this amendment. Next slide. The purpose of this amendment is to propose an increase of the AMI levels or area median income levels for affordable ownership units within the neighborhood form-based code project area. Next slide. So currently, projects under the neighborhood form-based code have a maximum income or income limit of 60% of the area median income as published by HUD annually. This table shows that household income by size is reflected. And as you can see, a family of 3 earning 100% of the area median income earns $113,400, and a household of 3 earning 60% of the area median income earn $65,520. So this is just a basis of information as we move forward through this presentation. Currently, only the households that are highlighted there in red would qualify for the affordable ownership units developed along Columbia Pike. Next slide. So the Neighborhood Form-Based Code currently has the same limits for rental as it does for ownership housing. Currently, rental and ownership units must be affordable up to 60% of the area median income. Both rental and ownership housing are affordable for a 30-year term, although the 2017 Carver Homes ownership units did include an affordability term of in perpetuity, which allowed them to continue to serve 60% home buyers in perpetuity. So while 89% of the county's affordable ownership units are affordable up to 80% of the area median income, currently the Neighborhood Form-Based Code units are limited to households that earn 60% and below. Next slide, please. The Columbia Pike Neighborhoods Area Plan, as we're looking at the guidance for this amendment, the Columbia Pike Neighborhood Area Plan specifically encourages the creation of ownership units above 60% of AMI, and that was adopted in 2012. And next slide, please. The master plan that was adopted in 2015 after the Neighborhood Form-Based Code zoning tool had a goal to incentivize the production of moderately priced ownership housing through land use and zoning policy. The Affordable Housing Master Plan specifically recommends encouraging the production of units between 80 and 120% of the area median income. Increasing the AMI for Neighborhood Form-Based Code affordable ownership units is one tool that will help to encourage the production of these moderate income units. Next slide, please. So why is this change necessary? Well, households at and below 60% of the area median income level experience significant challenges in obtaining and maintaining ownership. Our office, the Housing Division, works one-on-one with these households, providing homebuyer education and helping them to navigate the ownership landscape in this region. And I must say that these households at this income level that have been fortunate enough to actually purchase are really, really struggling at this time. Condo fees are at least $400 in most cases, in addition to their mortgage. Maintenance and repairs are needed, and their wages are not significantly increasing from the time that they purchase. These households have no cushion. They are literally one paycheck away from seeking a payday loan for necessities. And we see this in our office on a regular basis. Next slide, please. So I previously stated that the county's affordable ownership portfolio is almost exclusively affordable at up to 80% of the area median income. This slide tells more of that story. By limiting the units along the pike to 60% households, we eliminate other households that are often in a stronger financial position to mortgage qualify and to maintain homeownership. These are your paraprofessionals, your emergency personnel, your teachers. It is really, really important to remember that these are often two-income earner households. So for example, we have two siblings that are in an ADU. They've recently graduated college and they work in the community. So these are two paraprofessionals that would love to be able to live where they work, and they're able to do so through the extension of this portfolio. Next slide, please. So in 2018, the county conducted an employee housing needs survey. The impetus was the question of how do we boost recruitment and retention for public safety and personnel and educators. So when I sat down and talked to, in particular, APS employees, in this 41% category, they've literally abandoned the idea of ever being able to own a home in the community in which they serve. A lot of the Arlington Public Schools teachers would love the opportunity to purchase an affordable dwelling unit, but in the case of the units along the neighborhood form-based code corridor, they are obviously over income. Next slide, please. So I think Matt was going to talk to you about the elements necessary to generate these units.
Thank you. Yeah, I think much of our time is going to be spent discussing the area's needs for affordable ownership units. It is also worth reminding everybody of the unique circumstances under which such units even become available. This is obviously simplified for purposes of our discussion, but nonetheless highlights the various elements at play here, which all need to align in order for this entire process to be effective. As you can see, the zoning ordinance, of which the form-based code is a part of, has no control over the lending community or the real estate market, which even on their own have already proven to significantly constrain ownership opportunities, both regionally and nationally. With respect to the actual development along Columbia Pike, the form-based code zoning tool has produced almost 20 projects since it became available on Columbia Pike in 2003. While delivering over 3,400 total units, only 150 of them, or 4%, were condos, and only half of those were delivered using the neighborhood's form-based code. This was the Carver Home site on the eastern end of Columbia Pike. While the neighborhood's form-based code originally anticipated much of its projects to deliver rental units, and it has, it just so happened that one of the earlier projects approved in 2015 was Carver Place, which was a townhouse development that delivered 6 affordable units. The review of that proposal and ensuing process to identify qualified buyers led staff in 2017 to begin assessing whether the neighborhood's form-based code should distinguish between affordable rental and affordable ownership units with respect to income restrictions. Now, this 17-year trend I just mentioned, where 96% of the development was rental, was not unique to Columbia Pike. And it does reflect additional areas where on-site affordability is only triggered during the negotiation of bonus density. At a countywide level, that same decade of development primarily delivered rental units, as you can see here. And only 3% of the approved projects during this period represented new condos. During the course of this analysis, we also participated in multiple interviews with the development community. This involved for-profit and nonprofit firms with experience locally and nationally. A number of consistent themes began to emerge during these conversations, most notably the confirmation of just how difficult it is for condo projects to be realized and complete their review and construction process. As a result, the hurdles involved in this process result in the condo projects being quite rare and typically not exceeding a total of 150 units. This was recently identified on Columbia Pike as an issue as well, where a condo developer looking at the property at 4238 Columbia Pike, which is on the western half of Columbia Pike, upon learning of the significant on-site contributions of affordable units that had to remain at the 60% AMI levels, opted to instead pursue by right redevelopment. As a result, if you drive by the site right now, the single-family home that was located there is now in the process of being replaced with 17 market rate townhomes. And this is really, I think, one of the key points that we are going to try to drive home with this presentation, and that this is the real threat that I think the Neighborhoods Form-Based Code is continually trying to address. How do we incentivize redevelopment decisions by these property owners to make sure that they have a better outcome through the Neighborhoods Form-Based Code, and particularly make sure that the projects that they are considering are viable? Because if they cannot happen, then it doesn't matter what AMI category we're using, we're not going to have any condo projects to really even consider.
Okay, so throughout our process, we've determined that there may be some questions about the affordable ownership unit selection process and what that looks like. So I'm going to just provide a brief background of what that looks like. Next slide, please. So units within the Neighborhood Form-Based Code will serve residents that are living along the pike, yes. But they also will serve home buyers throughout the county, home buyers that wish to purchase at any time throughout the county, regardless of where they live within the county. The county has a notification list of pre-approved purchasers that have to meet income criteria and household size criteria based on the size of the available units. Participants who live and or work in Arlington do receive an additional drawing entry, because this is essentially a lottery. It's a random selection drawing. But additionally, we are including an additional drawing entry for neighborhood form-based code projects for people that already reside along the pike. As it relates to financing, the lender must agree to the restrictive covenants. Restrictive covenants are such that they have to remain the unit must remain a permanent residence for the person that purchases it, and there is a controlled period. Next slide, please. So the control period is the period in which the value of that property is connected to the HUD area median income increases. In this case, we are proposing a control period for the life and the use of the existing improvement as a residential dwelling unit. And the importance of this verbiage is to ensure that these units will be taxed appropriately, essentially into perpetuity. Without this type of verbiage, there would have been a time period, let's just say 30 years from now, where the unit would be taxed as a regular market unit. The appreciation, as I previously stated, the property values align with the increases in the HUD area median income limits. And again, the restrictive covenants are such that these units must remain the primary residence of the purchasers, and there are resale restrictions, in which case they would have to resell these homes to a household that meets the income criteria. Next slide, please. So in practice, the 6 affordable ownership units approved as part of the Carver Homes development in 2017 were sold for approximately $287,000. The condo fees were approximately $300 a month. Although we had 56 income and household size eligible households in our notification list, or our pool of interested buyers, only 7 of those households were actually able to mortgage qualify. And this goes back to the idea that at this income level, it is really, really challenging to obtain a mortgage. And this was in 2017. And at this time, the mortgage restrictions are even more stringent at this time, especially for households that are at this income level. But all 6 of the buyers had very little to no debt at all at the time of purchase, which is atypical for buyers of any moderate income range. For example, one car really can put your debt to income ratio through the roof if your income is low enough. Existing Carver Homes residents who mortgage qualified were able to receive additional preference for these affordable units at Carver, and 2 of those Carver Homes residents were able to purchase. So once again, it goes back to the fact that these were home buyers that really wanted to purchase in the Carver Homes development, but many of them were unable to mortgage qualify. Next slide, please. So here I'd like to just point out what our recommendation is. Next slide. Because of the significant challenges seen firsthand by the Housing Division among households within this income range, and to align with the tenets of the aforementioned guidance and the remainder of our affordable ownership unit portfolio, we recommend an increase in the affordability levels from 60% of AMI to 2 tiers of up to 80% of AMI and 100% of the area median income. Next slide, please. This slide shows a hypothetical example with a proposal of market rate condos. As shown, the net gain between the existing and the proposed units is 44 units. When our affordable unit factor is applied, we would obtain 11 affordable units. Under the existing requirement, all 11 of these units would be affordable to households at 60% of AMI or below, likely presenting significant challenges due to current and anticipated lending restrictions and ongoing financial constraints of the household. Under the proposed requirements, 6 units would be priced up to 80% of the AMI, and 5 units would be priced up to 100% of the AMI. Next slide, please. So again, applying a tiered approach ensures that more households that would like to purchase in Arlington have the chance to qualify for limited affordable ownership opportunities. In our proposed scenario, there are a lot more households that would be included in the possibilities of affording a affordable ownership unit. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Melissa to talk about the condominium conversion.
Thanks so much. And this is Melissa Danowski again. And this condominium conversion amendment would be considered by the county board at the same time as the amendment to increase the area median income of ownership units in October. And next slide. Staff is proposing adding clarifying language for what happens to affordable rental units in instances where an approved, constructed, neighborhood form-based code rental building decides to convert to condominiums. It may be difficult for a condominium building to continue operating the affordable units as rental units, and the proposed language is meant to acknowledge this issue and offer an option for the owner to convert the affordable rental units to affordable ownership units pending county board approval. The clarifying language states the owner must notify the county board and the county of the condo conversion and identify which of the rental units would either remain rental for the remainder of the compliance period or convert to affordable condominiums per the neighborhood form-based code ownership affordability requirements. Next slide. The AMI and condo conversion amendments have been considered by a variety of community groups, including the Form-Based Code Advisory Working Group in both 2017 and 2020, NAOP, the Commercial Real Estate Group, the Columbia Pike President's Group, and the Zoning Committee of the Planning Commission. At the June request to advertise, the county board authorized advertisement of this item for the October county board meeting in order to receive additional public input, including additional housing commission input. Thanks, and that concludes this portion of the presentation, and we look forward to your questions.
Thanks, folks. So we had two individuals sign up for public comment, and I see at least one of them. So our first public comment, and I believe Joel, she should be able to unmute herself, will be from Michelle Winters.
Correct.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi. So first of all, I do want to say, first of all, I'm Michelle Winters. I'm the Executive Director of Alliance for Housing Solutions, and I live here in Arlington. I do agree that the 60% of AMI level in the current plan is too low for affordable homeownership for all the reasons outlined by Akaria. It is very difficult for a household earning less than 60% of AMI to afford to rent in Arlington, as you guys know, much less than afford to buy a home with all the additional costs and stresses that come with that. So I support that component of things. And in general, I think it's more appropriate to keep rental affordable units targeted at 60% of AMI and below, while shifting upward the income levels of homeownership units. But that said, I'm really glad that the staff has revised the proposal down from what it was shopping around earlier before, which was going up to 120% of AMI, which I found to be far too high. If you look at the numbers, the sales prices, the current condo market in the area does seem to be serving households at that income level. And so requiring income and sales price restricted units at that high income did not seem appropriate. I think that some of the differences in opinion on reaching all the way up to 120% of AMI center on a difference of understanding of the Affordable Housing Master Plan. The Affordable Housing Master Plan does say to incentivize ownership units between 80 and 120% of AMI, but it's my understanding that of this goal that we should be striving to create naturally affordable units at that income level using land use and zoning tools rather than via subsidized units, which is essentially what these affordable dwelling units will be, subsidized through density. Subsidies should really be reserved for those at the lowest income levels. And the other issue I want to mention is that a common feature of housing programs that I'm familiar with, when they have a variation in income level served, is that they are often done as a sliding scale, meaning that when they serve lower incomes, there are fewer units required, and when they have serve higher incomes, there are more units required, so that essentially the total value of each option is roughly equivalent. For example, Atlanta's inclusionary zoning policy, they require 10% of the units if you're serving incomes at or below 60% of area median I, but they require 15% of the units for if a developer is serving those at 80% of AMI. So by increasing the income levels for the program while keeping the number of units required the same, then the county is reducing the cost to developers significantly. And this is something that could be addressed by requiring more affordable units at the higher income levels. I'd like to hear from staff whether this was considered, and if not, why not?
Thank you, Ms. Winters. Next on the list of public speakers is Juliet Hisney. Ms. Hisney, are you here? If you're on the phone, you'll need to hit *6 to unmute yourself. Okay. Well, if Ms. Hisney arrives, then we'll figure that out. So those are the only folks who signed up for public speakers. So now the matter is with the commission. Mind you, this is an information item only, so we're not acting on it tonight, but this is an opportunity to ask questions. And so we'll do the same as before.
Excuse me, I don't have a hand to raise. This is Alice.
Yeah, go ahead, Alice. And then Commissioner Sarah, if you're next.
Surface.
I'm sorry, I'll get it right.
I just wanted to note that it's almost 8:30 and this was an informational item, and I appreciate all the information. I'm hoping we can keep our comments brief because I think we're all really interested in hearing about the housing updates, which is the final item for this evening. Thank you.
Commissioner Surface.
Hi there. I just want to make a quick comment because I have been working with the county on a lot of these projects, and I agree with the county on the subsidies that it makes it really difficult to help people at 60% of AMI. I talk to people every day that are struggling. They purchase these units at Carver Homes, and they struggle with the condo fees that increase. They struggle with the real estate taxes because their incomes don't always keep up with the increase in the cost of living. The other thing that I'm always concerned about is that people at 60% of area median income don't have the means to make repairs to their homes. They're living paycheck to paycheck. And so we have these units were done in 2017. Like, what's going to happen to these units in 30 years? They're going to be falling apart. And how are we going to be able to maintain properties with people that are at this very low income? So I just want to mention that I think homeownership is all about building wealth, and at 60% of area median income, it's just really hard with all these restrictions to build any kind of wealth. That's it.
Thank you. So I'm going to place myself next here. This is an information item. Commissioner Hogan, I do get the concern, and obviously we both asked for evictions to be placed on the agenda. I'll get to Commissioner Brown. I'll get to you in a second. But I do think it's worth noting that this is not an uncontroversial proposal. There has been a lot of discussion. I know the county board has a lot of questions about this. You can go back and watch the presentation when they did the request to advertise a few weeks back. But I think what will be helpful is I'm going to actually read a little bit from an email that we got that I believe is being made public because it's part of the public record. It's a comment from John Snyder, who's a neighbor of mine, but John was incredibly involved with the development of the form-based code and continues to be on the CPRO board. And so John writes, the neighborhood's form-based code was developed to create incentives to preserve all the roughly 6,000 units of market rate affordable housing in the Pike. Affordability for the committed units is defined at 40, 60, and 80% of AMI. Basically, Mr. Snyder and other folks are concerned, and I share some of this concern, that the proposal to change affordability levels for condo developments is contrary to the plan, and also contrary to some of the other aspects of our overall affordable housing master plan. I'm concerned that it may incentivize the removal of affordable rental housing. And I don't think that, any of us would think that, providing opportunities for ownership to higher income levels at the expense of renter opportunities for lower income levels is really a policy that we think is worth county resources. And then, to echo a point that I believe Ms. Winters made, when I look at the Affordable Housing Master Plan and it talks about missing middle is something that's very important to me. It's a policy that I think we should continue to pursue. But when I look at the language in the master plan, it talks about the use of land use and zoning. And I see this more as a subsidy. I definitely think that we should be looking at housing opportunities for 80% AMI households. That missing middle desperately needs to be addressed, but I worry that this does so at a disadvantage to other populations that need our help more, and really it's just contrary to some of our other values. So staff can respond or not, but that's something that I'm thinking about as I'm weighing kind of this proposal is the idea of unintended consequences. And Commissioner Arthur has his hand raised. Go ahead.
Hi, yes. Mr. Matuzik, I'm curious, can you go over again the issue at 4238 Columbia Pike? This was the first I heard about that redevelopment. I had seen the construction while driving down a few weeks ago, and I've lived here for 6 years on the Pike, and I didn't realize that by right was an option. I thought everybody had to do form-based code. I guess it's been a while since I've actually read the code. And specifically, I hope you can address, did the developer in this case specifically ask about these ownership options for with AMI limits on them, and would have taken advantage of that if that were available now?
So this is, can you all see the screen?
Yes, I
Put
can.
up that slide 29. So this is just west of George Mason, almost across the street from the Tanglewood condos and the new Central building. The condo developer that is in the process of constructing this project is the same one that developed the other condo project on the Pike, which is at Buchanan Street, which is in the commercial form-based code, and it was a 4-story building. We've met with them several times over the years, looking at this site, considering potential consolidation efforts with the property to the west of this. However, because those property owners were not able to reach an agreement, I think we spent some more time looking at what a form-based code project would look like, given that the rest of this property is surrounded by the larger Barcroft apartments that are not looking to redevelop anytime soon, or were interested in partnering with this group. Having said that, despite the fact that the form-based code allows for 6 stories to be built along Columbia Pike and kind of the edge conditions of Barcroft, while the rest of the complex is preserved, that particularly started to become problematic when the subsidy for the affordable housing became quantified. And the trick here is, and this is why I think it's an important comparison to make to Carver Place, in that the sliding scale ratio that proportionally addresses each site on an individual basis in terms of what's there today versus how much you're replacing it with. When you start off with just having one single family home, essentially one unit on the site, anything you put on there, especially in the form of 6 stories, is going to really put you on the higher end of the spectrum in terms of on-site required units. And when those units, represent 30% of your entire project, they have to be subsidized by the developer, not the county. I know people speak about, density being the subsidy here, but it's really their cost that they're not recouping here. That becomes a significant factor because the form-based code, whether the commercial or neighborhoods, is still an overlay zoning district. It is an option that all the property owners can take advantage of should they feel it provides enough incentive for a alternative development scenario. But underneath all of that, the underlying zoning still remains, and these individuals have the ability to take that through the redevelopment process, which in this case is really just approving engineering plans and not really having a public process. So we lose out on any kind of energy efficiency, significant streetscape improvements, street connectivity, new park spaces, but most importantly, the affordability.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Commissioner Brown, you had turned your video on before.
Thank you. I would ask a couple questions. To Melissa's statement about the condo conversion, and I guess what would be an unintended consequence of this. Am I right that the AMI limitations that would apply would be the new proposed AMI limitations rather than the existing 60% AMI limitations?
Correct. If they were approved by the county board, it's slated to go, I believe, in October.
Okay. And then second, why I didn't follow the reasoning for the effectively perpetual duration of the control period. I didn't understand the tax assessment logic, and wonder if y'all could repeat that or re-explain.
Sure. Matt, if we could queue up, let's see what slide that was. If we could queue up we can start with slide 32. but if not, it's okay. Okay, great, thank you. So currently the control period in most cases would have been up to 30 years. But it's really important that these units remain affordable for households at certain income levels into perpetuity. And it's really tough to just say perpetuity. That's really not a term that our county attorney was comfortable with. So the verbiage that we landed upon was that the control period, or the period in which this unit must be sold and resold to households that meet the income level criteria, is for the life and the use of the existing improvement as a residential dwelling. So that means as long as it's a residential dwelling, it will remain under this control period. If there were a circumstance where the unit became commercial for whatever reason, then that would not apply here. But as long as that unit remains a residential dwelling, it would be an affordable dwelling unit, and it would apply to the restriction, and the restrictive covenants would apply to that unit.
And if I could just add a little more information to that,
sure.
It's been indicated from our tax assessment office that this is necessary in order to keep the taxes at the affordable price. And if it were affordable for any term less than the life and use of the existing improvement as a residential dwelling, then that unit would actually be taxed at the full market price, therefore making the unit unaffordable.
Huh. So okay. And why was it decided that the restriction ought to be perpetual? Because that does work against wealth creation, certainly.
Well, in order for the unit to remain affordable to subsequent households that purchase that property, this verbiage is required. Otherwise, we would lose the affordable dwelling unit stock at some point. And additionally, there would be one household that would benefit from a windfall whenever that control period ended, which is also not really the intent. So this is really put in place to ensure that we have long-term affordability. And I understand the idea that, you know, this is not the same in terms of wealth building as a market rate unit, and that is evident and that is absolutely clear. But for a lot of households that, number one, want to live in a brand new unit, where we're having these units newly built in a lot of scenarios, there is no opportunity to own a new unit in Arlington at an affordable price for a household at 60 or 80% of the area median income. But then additionally, it allows these households that may work in the county to also be able to live in the county, contribute to the county, and there is an appreciation associated with these units. So we typically see on average about a 3.5% increase of the area median income annually. But just 2 years ago, we saw about a 6% increase of the area median income. So those units increased in value by that percentage. Again, it is not the exact same as a market rate unit, but it does allow those households to put aside funds for their next step housing.
Thank you. So we're at 8:45 now. So what I'm going to do in the interests of time, so that we can hear about rental assistance and eviction prevention, is I'm going to move on to the next agenda topic. I understand that this is not ideal, and that we certainly could ask more questions to flesh out this topic area. I would encourage commissioners as well as the public to, reach out to staff with questions, to view the county board meeting where the request to advertise was debated. There's a lot of useful nuggets in there. And then also to keep an eye out for the Planning Commission meeting when it occurs, I believe in October. I believe that it will occur before our meeting. So I would encourage you to look at all of that. I am confident that this will be something that will generate a tremendous amount of discussion in the Housing Commission when we hear it back, and I believe it will be October. So thank you, county staff. So we're going to move on to the final part of our agenda, which is hearing about rental assistance and eviction prevention.
Yes, and we have Nicole Harmon from the Department of Human Services here.
Hi, can everyone hear me okay?
We can hear you, Nicole.
Okay, perfect. Hi, I'm Nicole Harmon, Department of Human Services, Housing Assistance Bureau. I'm actually going to present sort of our rental assistance, eviction prevention services update on behalf of the Community Assistance Bureau at DHS, who runs the operations of these funds. I also have Andrew Snyder, who's also on the call tonight for any additional questions from Arlington Thrive. So since the onset of the pandemic, the county has provided Arlington Thrive roughly $1.9 million in emergency assistance funding for county residents. Of that amount, at least $1.1 million was given in CARES Act funding through our colleagues at CPHD for eviction prevention assistance to low-income households in form of rental assistance, utilities, and household needs such as internet bills. So looking at our pre-COVID timeframe, from July 2019 through March of 2020, typically the Community Assistance Bureau, with through the help of our nonprofit partnership with Thrive, we uniquely have assisted 564 households in requests for prevention assistance funding. Starting from the sort of onset of the pandemic, I'll call it the COVID era, from March through, my data is as of June 12th. We're estimating, because we're still vetting through those numbers, that roughly 1,200 to 1,300 unique households will have been served. And this is representing 2,748 requests just in this last quarter alone. To give a little context on sort of a prior year comparison, in FY19, we roughly served 827 unique households. And that roughly translates to 1,497 issued checks. So we have nearly doubled, if not exceeded, the number of prevention payments issued through this last quarter than we have in our entire year of FY19. The average amount paid to households has also increased by at least 88%. So an average request in FY19 is roughly $679. Through this most recent COVID quarter, we're estimating the average household prevention check issued is around $1,275. Through an update through Thrive in the last quarter, our efforts have 53% of all rental assistance requests have gone to households that live in the 22204 zip code. 100% of these households are considered low income and are living in poverty. We have spent in this last quarter over $1.4 million in rental assistance. More than 200 landlords have received checks from Arlington Thrive in this most recent quarter as well. I do want to talk a little bit about a new funding opportunity that just hit our accounts last week, and that is the Rent and Mortgage Relief Program through the state. And this is out of the Department of Housing and Community Development, which was appropriated about $50 million in CARES Act funding for rent and mortgage relief. This program is specifically designed to support and ensure household stability across the Commonwealth of Virginia, as well as stabilize housing and efforts to help households maintain their housing in the interests of their overall public health during the pandemic, and provide financial assistance on behalf of households who are experiencing housing instability due to the pandemic. So the state's rent and mortgage relief program was made available only through continuum of care agencies. And this includes the Department of Human Services, because we are a lead continuum of care agency. And so we're folding this funding into our existing operations for prevention and eviction prevention assistance that we typically do through our state and local funding channels. So for the rent and mortgage relief program, eligibility requirements are pretty much similar. There is a focus on households who've experienced a loss of income due to COVID, which includes households that have been laid off, those whose place of employment has closed, those who have experienced a reduction in work hours, those that must stay home to care for children due to the closure of daycare and/or schools, and those who are unwilling or unable to participate in their previous employment due to their high risk of severe illness from COVID. Household income must be at or below 80% AMI, and that would be based on their current month income. And legal status does not matter for these funding. DHCD, through the state, released $450,000 to Arlington County last Saturday in advance funding for the rent and mortgage relief program. The idea with the advance funding throughout many jurisdictions in the state was that as the General District Court's moratoriums were lifted on the 28th, we begin to deploy these funds immediately within our community. The effective date of this funding is retroactive to March 1st, 2020, and will be ongoing through the end of the calendar year of 2020. As jurisdictions sort of deplete their advance funding, it's sort of an open-ended request that jurisdictions can make for additional funding through the state.
Is that all, Nicole?
Yeah, just in terms of eviction prevention.
Got it.
Unless there are any other questions on other programs.
So I'll open it up to if folks have questions. And I don't know if Andrew was going to chime in, but Andrew, if you certainly can, the Thrive being just such a monumental part of all this. So Nicole, I heard you say that legal status doesn't matter. Can we backtrack a little bit on that? So the program that you're talking about, that's the program that the governor announced in late June, correct? The new eviction prevention program?
That's correct.
So, and that program is getting CARES Act funding? That's
correct. 50 million.
Okay, I'm just trying to tie the threads together. So that's getting federal funding, and then that's the new program that the governor announced on June 25th or whatever. Legal status doesn't I didn't realize that. I mean, I think that's good news, but that's something that we always ask about.
Right. And our local funds as well, we serve anyone regardless of their documentation status. And I believe in addition to the CSBG funding that Thrive received, I think Jennifer Daniels is on the line. I don't think citizenship matters either for households that are seeking sort of these prevention services or assistance.
Okay. And Andrew, I see your hand raised and I saw the chat. Feel free to chime in, and if you want to show your face, you can turn on your video too, but it's your choice.
Yeah. I'm going to show my face, and then if my computer crashes, then we can decide why that happened. Was it because of my face or my bandwidth? You know, just honored to have color to this.
Yeah.
The important thing is that the county. Yeah. Am I coming through okay, Eric?
Now you are. We lost you, but we hear you now.
Okay. I'm going to do this. I was just going to say that happy to be here with Nicole and Jennifer. The county came through in a big way towards the end of the fiscal year. We were, by the end of the fiscal year, in the last quarter, we distributed in the magnitude of 400 to 500% of what we were distributing on a monthly basis the first 3 quarters of the year. So our volume just increased dramatically, distributed over $1.5 million worth of financial assistance in the last quarter, primarily through eviction prevention funds. At the end of the fiscal year, we started distributing some of the CDBG money. I just wanted to reiterate one thing that Nicole said, and I think it cannot be said enough, is that there is no impact, A, on public charge, and B, there is no status requirement for any of these funds of being available to folks. That doesn't mean that's not intimidating to people, especially for some of these funds. There is a lot of paperwork involved. We are working with our partners, with DHS, with our own case management team to allay some of those concerns, but there is a lot of just kind of, I don't want to say mistrust, but skepticism or fear out there for folks who might not have legal status about whether they should or can take these funds. So that is something we continue to work with our partners on.
So I have a follow-up on that, Andrew. So, you know, I understand, and it's, I hadn't been on a call with you in a few weeks, but I understood that, you know, about a month ago or so, that Thrive was starting to do some intake that the county normally does for some of its services.
Yep.
Is that still the case? And are you folks doing intake for these this eviction prevention program as well? Like basically, could a family that doesn't have status, could they call Thrive directly?
Yes, we. It's a great question, and luckily, we were able to utilize a small percentage of the CARES Act funding to bolster our case management staff, and from our own private funds, we have bolstered our case management staff. So yes, people can come directly to Thrive, and they know that. That said, we are still a small team, so most of our referrals are still, or requests are still coming in either through DHS or through one of our 18 to 20 partners, most of whom are either on this call or you're familiar with, whether it's Bugada or APA or AHC or EduForturo or La Cocina or whatever it may be. We are trying to work through our partners as much as possible so they can help us and validate us in that way.
And to add context for those who may be viewing this later or on the call who don't, you know, kind of understand, you know, typically somebody who's looking to apply for services would typically be funneled through the Department of Human Services, and then they would kind of refer them to Thrive or other, you know, providers. And so what Andrew's talking about is basically trying to come up with alternative venues so folks don't feel chilled, right, from getting the services we want them to get.
Bingo. And I think this is a major change and a major, I will have to say, just a major, you know, movement from DHS to open these things up as well. And we're very grateful that we're just trying to make it the barriers to entry as low as possible for everybody, regardless of how they want to come in the front door. You know, most people or a lot of people might be skeptical of walking in the front door of DHS, but are more willing to talk to us or one of our partners.
Well, you know, just speaking for myself, I really appreciate what Thrive is doing, Andrew, and I really appreciate what the county is doing. My personal concern, and again, if other commissioners want to chime in with questions or comments, my concern is that it's not enough money. My concern is that the need is so great. And even with the General District Court and the Circuit Court extending the moratorium locally here until I believe it's the 21st, towards the end of the month here, I just worry about an eviction kind of wave overwhelming everything. And quite frankly, I feel like the state needs to do way more.
Well, there are two things that we're looking at. And I think we're looking at them very closely. And I know that the county at the highest levels shares your concern and we're studying the trends that are coming in. The first thing is, like you said, the evictions opening back up for some landlords. And the second thing is the extended or the expanded unemployment benefits that are going to go away at the end of this month. Yeah. Some landlords, like App and HC, have extended their eviction moratorium through the end of the calendar year. So I think what we need to be doing from a community perspective is be not only anticipating what's going to be happening on the private side, but also working with our nonprofit partners and the affordable housing providers. So when that moratorium ends, that there's not a second wave or a tsunami then either. And I think luckily we have a little bit of time, but you're right, it's going to be a lot of money.
Right, because again, to be clear, because I think most people on this call would understand it, but for the general public, like a moratorium isn't cancel the rent or hold in abeyance, or it's just holding it in abeyance. It continues to accumulate. Right. It's just no eviction, but you still owe 3, 6, 9 months back rent, and that's what I still continue to worry about.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'll just add that one of the partnerships that was actually birthed out of the Tenant Landlord Commission prior to the COVID pandemic we were working on was where we consolidated some of the eviction hearings with the General District Court to sort of a single day during the week. So we have partnership with DHS and legal aid to provide sort of a intervention or mediation before those docket calls. So we have the judges on board in terms of there's a resource card flyer, there's also a referral form that is provided to, let's say, tenants that are coming in for their first hearing, so that we can provide and interject some of these resources before any docket hearing gets scheduled. So that is in process, that is in the works, and is starting to begin.
I appreciate that. And Kellen Macbeth, who's on this call, thank you, Kellen, for everything you've done on the Tenant Landlord Commission and that kind of lane before coronavirus hit with regards to eviction prevention. I'm not seeing any hands or anyone else trying to, let me see. So I think that's where we're going to have to leave it. I will say to the commission, it's been a difficult last few months, of course, dealing with a lot of different issues, and obviously not being able to meet, was a small part of that. And in the interim, I had worked with the commission when advocacy was needed, and I had signed a letter, if you recall, in my kind of capacity as chair, to request that, along with Kellen, the chair of the Tenant Landlord Commission, to request that the General District Court and Circuit Court, extend those moratoriums, the moratorium for evictions, at least locally. And if that's the case, that we need to do so again, or other advocacy, then I will reach out, because the Housing Commission will not meet again until at the very earliest September, and that is very much to be determined even then. It may not be till October. We'll have to see. But thank you, Nicole. Thank you so much, Andrew, for everything you're doing. And And Joel, I believe that is the end of our agenda. And
Can I ask one quick question about Thrive?
Go ahead, Doris.
Yeah, just quickly, is that specifically a county program, or is it, a nonprofit? Or I mean, I've heard of it, but I haven't seen a lot about it.
So I don't know if Andrew's still on, but Thrive is not a county entity, but it gets county support. It is a county partner, as I understand, for providing services. So they've been getting a lot of county
money
monies.
Coming through CDBG or something else.
I can speak to that real quick.
Yeah, go ahead. There's Andrew.
So sorry, I
That's
was
okay.
Thrive is a nonprofit, a 501c3 that was founded in 1975. Since our inception, it's been a mix of county funding, taxpayer dollars, and private funds. over the last 45 years, that's basically been about a 50-50 split. Throughout the course of the past 12 months, Arlington Thrive received for us, a large increase in public dollars, both through the normal county budgeting process, and then in addition to that, we also received funding from the county that the county received through the CARES Act. So all in all, we received several different supplemental funds throughout the year to meet the housing crisis brought on in part by COVID-19 over the last quarter. And in addition, we bring some of our own private dollars to that equation as well. I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you for that. We just received some alerts about applications, so that's what I was trying to clarify. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Doris. Okay, so I think that's all. I'm trying to remember, Joel. I don't think we need a motion to adjourn the meeting. So I believe I believe that is it. We are only a few minutes over 9 o'clock. So thank you for everyone for attending tonight, for participating to the commissioners. We will be reaching out soon to determine what the schedule will be like for the next Housing Commission meeting, and a recording of this meeting will be available on the county's website within, I believe, the next day or so. And a letter will be sent to the county board no later than Wednesday next week regarding the cash contribution aspect of the neighborhoods form-based code that we voted on tonight. That is all. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a pleasant evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.